Good morning. I am calling the Mental Health and Wellness Committee to order at 9 o'clock on the dot. There was no need for any executive session before this meeting. Stand up for the pledge, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Doug, attendance, please.
Mrs. Brennan,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Weaver.
Here.
3 present, 0 absent.
I don't think there's anybody here or there's any papers of anyone attending.
I didn't see any.
So no. All right. Discussion. So I wanted to begin with kind of creating like a baseline for the community. I didn't want to go in and tackle just a specific topic, as creating a baseline for, what the district has, different areas, kind of leading in with some baseline information, stats and whatnot. And I'm going to begin by having Dr. Smale give some information, if you'd like, on, what each school or the district has as far as counselors, programs and stuff.
Sure, I'll talk generally. Sorry.
You're gonna turn on to your little button in front. And once you green, you're good. Hold it down. Now it's up.
Oh, it doesn't want to work.
There you go. Now you're live.
Click in there.
Thank you. I'll talk generally at first about the philosophy of our pupil service department. Our philosophy centers on the belief that student well-being is foundational to academic success in school. We have a variety of people in our department: school counselors, school psychologists, our nursing department, social workers, speech pathologists, and in addition to several other people that we work with through the IU, for example, auditorial services, OT services, to support our kids. We recognize that not all students learn at the same rate or the same way. And we do realize that there are students that have to overcome significant barriers, but if we have the appropriate support in place for them, we believe that all students can be successful. So to break it down by level, at each elementary building, we have one counselor. At the middle school level, we have 3 counselors, and at the middle school level, the counselors follow the kids through each grade level. So for example, to explain that, if Mr. Wilderson, for example, who's currently our 8th grade counselor, he will take in the 6th grade group next year, and he will remain with those students as 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders. As you can imagine, that allows him to develop a really good rapport with the kids and the families and support them with any social emotional needs that they need during their duration of time at the middle school level. At the high school level, we actually have 5 counselors. It's divided up a little bit differently there. Due to some of the responsibilities that counselors have. They do not take students by grade level, because as you can imagine, as you get into the upper grade levels, 11th and 12th grade, there's a lot of responsibility in regards to recommendation letters and college things. So they actually break kids up by letters of the alphabet. So they have an equal number of students. In addition to that, we have a social worker. We have 2 social workers, excuse me. We have one that works primarily at the elementary level, K to 5. And we have another one that works at the secondary level, starting at grade 6 and working up through 12th grade. So they do individual counseling with kids who maybe have more extensive needs. They do small group counseling. They work primarily with our emotional support kids, in some cases with our therapeutic emotional support kids as necessary. They also are very much our leaders in our SAT process. When students need services that go beyond the school level, and we're bringing in outside services to help. They help with the logistics of that and coordinating that and working with families. So those are they're 2 very critical people that we have in our district that do a lot of work to support our kids and our families. And in regards to our nursing program at each of our buildings, we have for example, at elementary, let me start with elementary. We have four buildings. We have 2 nurses. They split buildings. So we have one, each of them cover 2 buildings. In addition to that, we have a health assistant in each one of our buildings. And in the middle school and the high school, we have a full-time nurse in each of our buildings, in addition to 1 health assistant. I think if I covered everything else. And in regards to additional support that kids need, whether it's speech services or OT services, that's more of an as-needed basis, because there's ebbs and flows to that depending on the building from time to time. So each year we take a look at that and how many students, for example, in each building need those specific services, and then we coordinate accordingly to what are the needs of our students.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I did not talk. Yeah.
So I also, in addition to that, wanted to bring to the table something that was shared with me from Dr. Smale and the 2 social workers that we have when I met with them several times. It was sent to me, and I will have Dr. Smale, if you know where it's located, for the community or the parents of the district to access. However, I have in front of me 2 we'll call them guides, documents that has an abundance of resources. When we think about mental health, and I'm sure you know, working with the kids, and as I know, I've worked with kids, the mental health, the behaviors, and what's going on is not about anything but an unmet need, right? So it can come from a family struggling with finances, and then it trickles down into the family. It could be something with like unemployment or losing their home or lack thereof food, something to that effect. So sometimes that trickles down into the family, and the family system trickles down into the child, and then behaviors begin. So there is a 101-page document here called Southwestern Resource Guide. I printed all 101 pages, and I looked through them, and it's a lot, from camps, like summer camps, to even things for adults, to help with food, and even the elderly, vocational, everything you could need, not just what people think specifically is just counseling. There is a list of counseling places. I am going to add to some of it, if that's okay. I will send in a document, because I'm going to look through it more detailed, because I have more to add to it. And then there's another only 4-page document that I think is just a very quick summary of what they called, also what they gave me, the Hanover area resource. So it's just specific to Hanover only. Also has like Amazing Kids Club, Community Progress Council, community aid, food banks, also therapeutic places, and such, specific only to Hanover, if that's what a family so chooses to focus on. So these 2 documents are available. Where exactly how would someone be able to access this information?
So each of our counselors has access to that document. So if a family would come forward and indicate that they had any kind of specific need, our counseling department would be able to share the appropriate resources. Whether it, you had listed a number of different resources that can be found in there. I'll give you an example. We recently met with a family who was struggling with housing, and the counselor that I was working with was able to pull out information and share some of the local resources that help in regards to shelters, the YWCA Safe Home Program, and share that information with the family, because they were struggling with some things that had happened, some very unfortunate circumstances. So there's those kind of resources that are also found in that guide. I know our social workers, Amanda and Jen, they take a look at that every year over the summer. It's sort of a dynamic document that can be updated. So it's updated yearly. And again, our counseling department has access to that in addition to our social workers as they work to support our families.
Are you asking if we can place that on our district website?
No, I just didn't know if it was, or how, if it wasn't, how a parent would be able to get any of this information.
We
Thank
can
you.
absolutely work with the district to create a tab, because obviously there's a wealth of resources in there that they may be more comfortable seeking on their own as opposed to going through the school. And so because of that, that's something that Dr. Smale and I can work with our tech department to create information to make that available on our website so parents can access
Yeah.
it as they need it.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, that would be
That's a
great.
great
If-
idea.
If
Yeah,
I could
that's
just
actually
add,
would be ideal, especially how large it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't actually realize how large, because I printed this one out first, which was only 4 pages. I was like, okay. And when I looked through this one and printed, and it kept printing and printing, I'm like, oh, this is 101 pages. So it's a lot, and it is very detailed, and it's York County based. So the 101 is not just Hanover. And unfortunately, and I'm just gonna put this out there with the needs of the community, the county, the state, the country. It's unfortunate, but parents and families are going to have to go out of the area a lot of times, especially since, yes, there is a waiting list everywhere. I am going to say that right now. I don't know of any place anywhere that does not have a waiting list as far as outpatient counseling. I don't even know if there's any place right now that has a waiting list, or that does not have a waiting list with like in-home type services. So I do want to put that out there. But yes, thank you if that can be.
I think the other thing it could do is, a lot of times if our families are in services and they're working with another provider, it could help coordinate the services without saying, because a lot of times if a provider says, well, what does the school offer? If they don't know, we can make this available to our medical community and our support services around the area so that it can be accessed by them as well. So it can help and lead a more efficient coordination of services. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it, most importantly informing our parents, and then secondarily allowing for more coordination of resources, because I don't know all 101, and I'm sure our providers and our parents don't either. So it's a great reference point.
and to add to what Dr. Burkhart shared, one of the things I'm working on individually is one of my goals is working with our technology team to create a pupil service dashboard. And under each, on the dashboard, there would be a page for our nursing department where they could list specific information, for example, about immunizations. And our social workers will have a page, our counselor, there'll be a counseling page, and part of that would be so we can give easy access to our community on documents such as that. So I would envision that document, we'd be able to put that on, I'm thinking probably our social worker page, that they could direct our families to when they contact them for easy access and efficiency to getting access to those documents.
And also, like Dr. Burkhart mentioned earlier, if a family does not feel comfortable, contacting someone in the district about something due to shame, embarrassment, or being judged or whatnot, they can go onto the website themselves and just click the tab and access it themselves. So that would be great. And an easy way for them to get some help that they need.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that is that one really important baseline bit of information I did want to put out there, and I did want the community to know and we can work through around. There's a lot of different topics that we could sit here for hours, but we're not going to. And the reason is because there are many topics, and they require a little bit more in-depth conversations and in-depth know-how to get through. I do want to make the community aware that the school district, and I'm saying this because I think there's an impression, or maybe I'm wrong, but there's an impression that somehow the school is these buildings are some sort of like inpatient therapeutic field facility. And they're not. They're here to educate, and they deal with a lot of situations, from behavioral to special ed to all kinds of fights to bullying to kids being normal teen development. I'm going to be not a nice kid kid. So there's all kinds of different things that are going on in the teen world, but in the schools, they're not treatment facilities, and they don't have a staff of therapists per se, right, on hand. This is not like, they have the social workers, they have the counselors, but there is not this make an appointment, you're going to have therapy every week, type of place. What I am trying to do is also focus on each topic throughout the year, so that the community knows where the school's going with it, what's happening. I do want to very quickly, as an example, and I'm going to call on you again, Dr. Smale, because me and you had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. So when I met with the two social workers and Dr. Smale a couple times in the last month and a half, we talked about one of the topics that has been something that the community has been very vocal about, and we've talked about in meetings throughout the past year. And that topic is bullying. Very quickly, or in a long story short manner, what can you share what we've talked about as far as like what, and however way you want to do it, the schools or whatever have in place for that?
Sure, and I have a document that I can share with each of you as I talk through sort of our approach to bullying. One of the things that I've always tried to share with parents when you think of a school, and I recognize the emotions that come out when there is an incident and you are concerned about the way that your child is being treated by peers or other students in the building. And one of the things that I've always tried to convey to parents is that we're always going to do our best to try to ensure that every kid that comes into our building feels safe and respected. And one of the other things I've always tried to convey to parents as a principal is each of our buildings is kind of like its own small town. And I've always tried to convey sort of the message, if you think about a small town, even if you remove the kids from the situation, completely move all kids from that town, and you have a town of, say, 1,400 adults or 1,000 adults, ultimately, from time to time, there's going to be disagreements. There's going to be concerns. There's going to be issues that come up. That's just being human. So what we try to do is working with kids is we take an approach, and you see here sort of the way that we approach incidents when they come up. First of all, we really try to encourage our students to be citizens. And there's a lot of different ways that they can report things that they are concerned about. One, of course, is they can come to the office and they can talk to an administrator, or they can talk to a counselor, and they can share confidentially concerns that they have about how a student is being treated by his or her peers. In addition to that, we also have the Safe to Say program, in which they can submit a tip anonymously. Now, we do encourage our students, when possible, to always report those things in person, because there's always an additional information that we're able to collect confidentially that allows us to handle the situation a little more efficiently. But we also know from time to time that kids feel more comfortable sharing those things through the Safe to Say app or website, because it does ensure their confidentiality. So we always ask kids that they report any allegation or any concern that they have to the counseling department or administration, so we can take a look at it. Then what we will do as a counseling department or administration is we will investigate and respond to the situation, and if appropriate, take action. We will inform the parents or the guardians of the perpetrator, and the bullying targets will be contacted as well, and we will share the results of that investigation with each of them. Okay? And then the final part of that is the action. From time to time, we will take disciplinary action and assign consequences according to our discipline policy. In some cases, if the bullying or the threat is substantial, we will actually involve local law enforcement, if appropriate. But there's a couple follow-up pieces to that I think are important, that everybody kind of understands. We want to ensure that the students who engage in the behavior understand the potential harm. So there's sort of a counseling learning follow-up to that. And that understand that the impacts of those behaviors are unacceptable and will not be tolerated. We also work to ensure that the target of the bullying understands that they will be safe. And we're going to do everything possible and be proactive, take a very proactive approach to ensure that whatever the situation was is dealt with appropriately, and they feel coming to school that they're going to be safe, and there's not going to be any kind of retaliation to whatever the consequences were for the perpetrator. In some cases, that takes care of it. Just administering consequences. In other situations, we do put in place appropriate safety plans for kids. And then the final part, I think, is continuing to emphasize that any witnesses to it or bystanders continue to understand that they have a responsibility. This is not just a response. If you're truly going to have a strong school culture, it takes everyone. It takes administration, it takes the counseling staff, it takes the teaching staff, but just as important, it takes the kids, and in some cases their families, to be willing to bring these concerns forward so we can appropriately address them. You don't want to sit on these kind of things and let them fester, where they continue, because especially now with all the electronic things that kids have access to, I mean, in some cases these things are happening beyond the school day, and we're not aware of what's going on because we're only dealing with what we're working with in school. So it really takes the whole community to work to ensure that our schools are as bully free as possible.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm only asking it because I know the answer, but I want to kind of talk about it here real quick because some people may not know the answer to this. So you defined by the district's bullying policy that bullying and cyberbullying shall mean an intentional electronic, written, verbal, or physical act or series of acts directed at another student or students which occurs in a school setting and or outside a school setting that is severe, persistent, pervasive, and has the effect of doing any of the following: interfering with the school's education or the student's educations, creating a threatening environment, disrupting orderly operation of school, or hurtful behavior done on a single event. As a single event is not bullying as well. So that last part, a hurtful behavior done as a single event is not bullying, which is where I was going with what I wanted to say. So we know what bullying is, right? And we know the consequences and how it works at the school or the school district. If, let's say, Johnny is calling somebody ugly, we're going to be really simple and basic, right?
Okay.
And the next day, Johnny calls the same person ugly. And then let's just say a third day. Because if we go by this definition, that's not bullying, right? That's hurtful behavior done as a single event, because he's just saying, you're ugly. It happens. Kids are mean. So this kid's just being mean, right? And he's like, you're ugly and your shoes are blah. And we can insert teen language or kid language that they're using right now that is still not nice, right? That I would not know what it is because I don't speak it, but let's just insert it. If someone is if a kid is being mean, that does not necessarily fall under the definition of bullying. What then does the school or school district, and I guess maybe it will depend on the school or the principal or the vice principal, but what then does happen so that it doesn't lead to more serious behaviors?
Well, first and foremost, if we have a situation where a kid is treating another kid, he's being rude to him or her, or just being mean, we are going to address that appropriately with consequences. We're going to follow up with the parent and make sure the parent is involved, because again, it goes back, it takes a village to raise a child. And it's very important that we address it at the school level and ensure the kid that this type of behavior is not going to be tolerated in the school setting. But then the second piece of that is also informing the parent and making sure the parent is aware of the behavior and how it's impacting the other student who the victim of who this child is being mean to. So they have, as a parent, have an opportunity to deal with. Because ultimately, when you have that support from the parent, that's the most likely way you are going to deter behavior. It's a partnership. It's the school working together with the parents, understanding that, look, I raise my children the best way I know how to raise them. When they come and they ask me questions, I do my best to give them appropriate responses, and I do my best to teach them to do the right thing. But I also understand that they're kids. And even though I tell my son and my daughter in every situation to sort of take the high road, so to speak, and make good decisions, they're still kids and they're still going to make mistakes and they're still going to get caught up from time to time in some of the peer driven pressures that come about. I feel my role as a parent is when those things happen to deal appropriately with my children and say, no, that is not how this male family will respond. I'm just using myself as an example to these type of situations. And as a principal, and even in my current role, I think it's important to, when we work with parents, to understand we're working with you to make your child ultimately a better person and a better student. So we need to work together. And I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but ultimately, I think this comes down to when we contact a parent, we're not being accusatory. We're not judging you as a parent. What we're trying to do is work together with you to provide logical consequences just to ensure that in the future, it deters his behavior or gives your child an understanding of how to handle situations like this going forward.
I agree. I think that that's a conversation for, it's a difficult conversation because especially in the work I do, and I specifically work with parents and kids because, when working with families, it's very easy to say, I'll use Johnny as an example, right? Johnny is flipping chairs at school. Johnny is cursing at, Sally, and Johnny's cussing me out, or he's not doing his homework, or what have you. I can list numerous things that could be said by a parent, and in the end, it's not because it's all Johnny. It's the parent has to get involved, and I will say this endlessly. There's some need somewhere that's not being met, wherever it is, and we just got to figure that out. But I like the fact that you said that the school works with the parents too, collaboratively. I don't think it's just the child's individual responsibility only, and that's it. I don't think it stops at the child. I think having the collaboration with the family, the parent or the parents, is extremely important when it comes to behaviors, good or bad. Even just if we're talking about responsibility, bringing their homework, doing, all that encompasses school, treating kids nicely, respect.
And I'll just share, I've been in the school district now for 17 years. And one of the things, and I was an administrator for the first 16 of those, and I can say unequivocally that the large majority of Southwestern community parents are always very supportive. When I have contacted parents for whatever the reason would be, the large majority of families in this district are very supportive of the schools, very supportive of the work that we do from a counseling perspective and administrative standpoint, and supportive. And that's one of the reasons I've been here for 17 years. I have children in the district, but I enjoy the relationships that I live in the community. I enjoy the relationships that I have or have had with parents because I feel like the large majority of parents in our community are very supportive of the education that their children get here.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you.
Since we are on discussion, I just wanted to point out the purpose of this committee to me, in not only identifying mental health issues in our society and in our young people, but also the resources. And I thought the ideas that you guys presented with links of resources and things like that, that's great. I think it would help a lot of people because what is it? 90% of all people avoid confrontation 90% of the time. I just made those numbers up, but I'm sure it's close. So those resources on there, that would definitely help a lot. My position is as a parent, and I've been taking notes since before COVID. So my notes, actually, I put them into AI this morning and said, hey, organize everything for me so I can go through some stuff. So some of my notes are around COVID and go through some other things. So if you guys want me to go through some of those, it's probably going to take me at least 10 minutes. But it actually, AI did very good on that. But I wanted to do that because it also, as we come full circle, you see AI mentioned a few other times in a negative way. So that's why I wanted to, from a parent standpoint, and as a foster parent, I've had to deal with crazy things with all types of traumas, and setting up those counseling and therapy sessions and everything else. And also trying to do it on the computer during COVID is wild. Trying to do trauma therapy on a computer, it's not possible. So my notes intensified during COVID and then continued afterwards. But I'll go down through here. COVID-19 pandemic significantly accelerated the decline in adolescent mental health, compounding pre-existing issues and introducing new stressors that have had lasting effects. Global increase in anxiety and depression. In the first year of the pandemic, the World Health Organization reported a 25% global rise in the prevalence of anxiety and depression, with young people among the most affected groups. Elevated mental health symptoms. A study by Columbia University found that the heightened depressive symptoms and worsened mental health observed among adolescents during the pandemic persisted for up to 2 years. And that was from Columbia University Teachers College. Then from PubMed and the NIH, increased clinical depression and anxiety. Research involving 593 young people reviewed high levels of clinical depression, 48%, and anxiety, 51% during the pandemic, along with significant feelings of loneliness. So when all the kids were shut down, in their rooms and just on a computer, that's where we were looking at. Accelerated brain aging. A study published by the National Institute of Mental Health indicated that adolescents assessed after the pandemic shutdown exhibited neuroanatomical features typical of older individuals or those who experience chronic stress, suggesting accelerated aging of the brain. And that's from National Institute of Mental Health. Persistent behavioral issues. Research published in Springer showed that behavioral problems in adolescents increased during the pandemic and remained elevated even as restrictions eased. So a lot of these things, like I said, it ties into parents a lot of time, and that relationship between parent and school. And that's where sometimes there's a breakdown in communication, where parents think somebody in the school is blaming them or saying that their parenting's bad or something like that. So that's why I try to put all of this out at parents. Parents need to be aware of things because there's a breakdown in communication a lot of times. Contributing factors. Several factors contributed to the decline of adolescent mental health during the pandemic. Social isolation, disrupted routines, economic stress like financial hardships in the families, increased screen time, reliance on digital devices for education and social interaction led to increased screen time, which has been associated with negative mental health outcomes. While it's challenging to quantify the exact percentage of mental health decline attributable solely to the pandemic, evidence indicates that COVID-19 significantly exacerbated existing mental health issues among adolescents. The combination of increased anxiety, depression, behavioral problems, and even changes in the brain development underscores the profound impact of the pandemic on youth mental health. So if we look at key statistics on youth mental health, I don't have updated numbers. I have 2023 because they're always they're always back on that. Now we're in 2024. Depression and anxiety, approximately 40% of U.S. high school students reported experiencing persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, and that's from the CDC. Also from the CDC, children aged 3 to 17, 10% had a current diagnosis of anxiety, 9% of males, 11% of females. 4% had a current diagnosis of depression, 3% of males and 6% of females. And also from the CDC, about 20% of high school students seriously considered attempting suicide, and nearly 9% attempted suicide. Among youth aged 12 to 17, 13.4% experienced suicidal thoughts. 6.5% made suicide plans. And that is from Mental Health America and the CDC. Substance abuse disorders, approximately 6.34% of youth reported a substance use disorder in the past year, equating to over 1.5 million individuals. That number coincides pretty closely with the suicide planning rate. 6.5%, 6.34%. It's very close. So then if we also look at articles like social media algorithms and teen addiction, that's a big issue right now. So as I said, AI comes through a lot in this. It was this particular article was published in Curis. It was also in the NIH PubMed Central. They talk about the neurobiological impact. The study highlights that frequent engagement with social media alters dopamine pathways, which are crucial for reward processing. This alteration fosters dependency similar to substance addiction. Additionally, changes in brain activity within the prefrontal cortex and amygdala suggest increased emotional sensitivity and compromised decision-making abilities. That's also from PubMed Central. So what people don't realize a lot of times is when you have a reward, dopamine spikes in the brain immediately. When it doesn't, then over time, serotonin levels in the brain decrease. So when you don't get that dopamine rush, which is what they get on social media, that 10 seconds, oh, that's not interesting, swipe. So that neurobiological impact was a big focus there. Psychological and neurological concerns. This is also from PubMed on the NIH. AI-driven social media algorithms are designed to capture attention and maximize screen time, which can lead to addictive behaviors among teenagers. This cycle of optimized content and heightened engagement activates the brain reward centers. That's that dopamine immediately, promoting social media addiction and raising ethical concerns regarding privacy and content personalization. The kids don't care about privacy when it comes to that instant gratification, that instant dopamine rush. So the role of AI-driven algorithms. Oh, I need to go to the next one. Ethical considerations. There was some in the notes about AI-driven content optimization. There's a lot of issues right now between legislation and targeting youth and how they target them and how they use them. The article underscores profound impact of AI-driven social media algorithms on teenage neurobiology, leading to addictive behaviors, raising ethical concerns. A new study explores how teenagers, this is a different one, teens see social media algorithms as a reflection of themselves, and that may have negative impact on their mental health. That was printed in the Cincinnati Herald. Apparently my notes didn't transfer over to who wrote that article. But a new study explores how teenagers perceive the content shown to them by social media algorithms. Teens often interpret these personalized feeds for you as a reflection of who they are, their interests, identities, and even their worth. This can lead to distorted self-perceptions, especially when the content includes unrealistic beauty standards, idealized lifestyles, or harmful trends. Teens feel judged or categorized by what algorithms show them. This can cause anxiety or pressure to conform to certain images. The perception that the algorithm knows me makes negative or harmful content feel personally relevant, which can intensify psychological effects. So this is where I was saying, as a parent, parents need to be aware of these things. Your social media is not the product. Your child is the product, which is why it doesn't cost anything. People are making money off of your child. So that's where, as a parent, hopefully more people watch these meetings. That's why I figured it'd be great to go over my notes, because if people go back and watch this thing and say, whoa, okay,
Can I give an example on that topic?
absolutely.
So I'm actually giving an actual current not live, current up-to-date example of a family I'm working with. Child is 10, 5th grade. For me to be working with the family, they have to have specific diagnoses and they have to be referred by specific people. So he has 3 diagnoses. So one of the things he's struggling with is behaviors at school, impulsivity, right? And I'm sure we have lots of kids here with
That
impulsivity,
mention of the
right?
prefrontal cortex.
You're right. So impulsivity, and he has an IEP, and whatnot. Very extremely smart. These kids are smarter than me. And it's insane the amount of information they know. But he's very smart. So that isn't the issue. One of the things that he is very hell bent on is social media, AI, ChatGPT, apps, screen time, basically, right? I'm sure that this is not newfound information for you guys, right? Because the school, parent, all that. One of the things that we had to work, and because parents, unfortunately, this is not against any parent because we've all done it. I can guarantee you I did it back when my kids were little too. The screen is used as a babysitter because parents are busy doing something else. They could be coming home from work. Oh my gosh, I'm getting dinner ready. Yes, sir. Johnny, sit on your iPad, TV, computer, phone, whatever. So one of the things that we've been working on is it's hard for the parent and it's hard for the child is decreasing screen time. We got the overall, this child spends about 4 hours a day. That's on school days on the screen, which means that's 4 hours in the evening, basically. And then there's multitude of hours during the weekend. And we literally had mom decrease it to 45 minutes a day. That's a substantial difference from 4 to 45. I will tell you that when I have been, this is recent, meeting with the child, it was interesting because I've worked in the drug and alcohol world, addiction world, right? It is it's almost simultaneous putting the withdrawal from that child I was seeing from the screen time, we'll call it, to someone withdrawing from drugs and alcohol. It was scary.
Mhm.
It was very scary. And there was some, I'm not going to say, there was aggressive behavior at one point, and we had to let it play out, and we had to, it was a whole thing that evening. But it was very simultaneous and scary how the withdrawal from the screen was almost identical to the withdrawal from addiction.
I've seen it firsthand with about a dozen kids, because
Mhm.
obviously people see them at school, that they go home with us at the end of the day, you know.
And
I have a few more that actually, I'm almost at the end of my notes here, but I have a few more as far as screen time and things like that. This particular one I found, this was a year ago. It says February 2024. I found it from Harvard Chan School of Public Health. Internal documents from companies like Instagram have revealed awareness of the platform's negative effects on teen mental health. Whistleblower Frances Haugen exposed that Instagram's own research showed the platform's algorithmically driven feeds could draw vulnerable teens into negative spirals of social comparison, yet little was done to address these issues. So they're admitting to it, but it makes money. So that's why parents need to be aware your child is the product being sold. Quantifying the exact percentage of teen mental health decline attributable solely to social media is challenging due to the multifaceted nature of mental health issues. However, research indicates a significant association between high social media usage and increased mental health challenges among adolescents. Increased risk with high usage. Adolescents spending more than 3 hours daily on social media are at double the risk of experiencing mental health problems, including symptoms of depression and anxiety. That was posted on hhs.gov 3 years ago. Correlation with poor mental health. A study found that 41% of teens with the highest social media usage rated their overall mental health as poor or very poor, compared to 23% among those with lower usage. And that was posted 2 years ago on American Psychological Association. So they are actively gathering data on this for several years now. Approximately 11% of adolescents exhibit signs of problematic social media behavior, struggling to control their use and experiencing negative consequences. The World Health Organization posted that in 2019. So that's very interesting as well. Teen girls are more likely than boys to report negative experiences on social media, such as feeling worse about their lives, 34% versus 20%. And experiencing pressure to post popular content, 36% versus 26% for boys. That was Pew Research Center that did those numbers. While these statistics highlight a strong correlation between social media and mental health challenges, it's important to note that correlation does not imply causation. Other factors such as sleep deprivation, cyberbullying, offline social dynamics also play significant roles in adolescent mental health. In summary, while it's difficult to assign a specific percentage to the impact of social media on mental health decline, evidence suggests that excessive use is a significant contributing factor. So let's see, one more thing I have here, which also mentions, which I had noted several years ago, evidence-based learning programs, social emotional learning, implemented correctly, not the incorrect way. Social emotional learning programs such as Sources of Strength, Good Behavior Game, Life Skills Training focus on building resilience, emotional regulation, and positive behaviors among students. These interventions represent a multifaceted approach to addressing youth mental health challenges in the post-pandemic era, combining policy changes, technological innovation, community support, and educational strategies. So that is where it kind of ties in with the family and school and resources like that. So I did make a note of that. Social emotional learning is twisted a lot into other things and the political arena in certain areas. I don't see that issue here in this area. York County is very good with, obviously, we've heard of Sources of Strength before here in our buildings as well. The Good Behavior Game was another one that I heard from other teachers in other districts. And I thought that was interesting too, which goes into restorative discipline practices. So the last thing in my notes is more at the adult side of things so that adults can think of how they affect youth mental health. So how adult mental health influences youth mental health. Emotional environment at home. Children are highly sensitive to their caregivers' emotional states. Parental depression, anxiety, or stress can lead to an unstable or tense home environment, increasing a child's own anxiety or behavioral issues. Kids may internalize the distress, feeling responsible for it, or even mirroring those emotions, which we've seen. And like I said before, the breakdown of communication, there's not as many people talking about it because it's embarrassing or whatever it might be, but people do need to be aware of it. Because as we talked about before, if a parent is completely emotionally dysregulated and goes off the handle at the slightest little thing, that's where you get kids learning those behaviors as well and acting out in school and other things like that. So as Dr. Smale was talking about earlier, they do recognize these things, and that's what the importance of social and emotional learning is when implemented correctly. Parents struggling with mental health may have difficulties with consistent discipline or boundaries, emotional responsiveness, like being nurturing or attentive. This can lead to attachment issues, low self-esteem, and greater risk of mental challenges in children of all ages. Modeling coping strategies. Adults model how to handle emotion, stress, and conflict. Children learn by observation. If an adult uses unhealthy coping skills, kids are more likely to develop those as well. Conversely, adults who cope through substance abuse, anger, or even avoidance may directly and indirectly teach kids to do the same thing. My next part there is intergenerational transmission of trauma, unresolved trauma in adults, and chronic mental health issues in adults and parents can lead to that trauma affecting children's development and their resilience. And like I mentioned a second ago, coping skills, healthy and unhealthy coping skills, big issue because people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to admit they're depressed. They don't want to admit whatever's going on. Teachers, counselors, and community leaders play key roles. Burnout or poor mental health among these adults can affect the quality of support youth receive in schools or programs as well, which we've pointed out before when we had this meeting last year. It's very important to be looking out for our teachers because we don't want burnout to carry over. We don't want unhealthy coping skills to arise and then show that to our young people. So we have to really be concerned about all of society because all of society affects the kids. The adults affect the kids just as well. Children of parents with clinical depression are 3 to 4 times more likely to develop depression themselves. And that's also from the NIH. A 2019 meta-analysis found that parental anxiety disorders are significantly associated with child anxiety disorders that carry over into adulthood. During the COVID-19 pandemic, families with higher adult stress levels saw a marked increase in child anxiety and depression, according to studies from the CDC and the APA. Supporting adult mental health is a form of preventative care for youth because it directly correlates. Programs like family therapy, parenting support groups, school family partnerships can be effective, as I mentioned before. Encouraging adults to seek help sets a powerful example for children that it's okay to ask for support. And that was the end of my notes. I trusted ChatGPT to organize them, and it worked. So AI does work, but it'll be targeting me later.
Yes, sir.
But I just wanted to stress that importance of always looking at studies and figuring out how things are connected and related, and everything is related. It all is. So like Dr. Smale said, it takes a village for these kids, and it really does. So adults have to look out for adults as well. So it's very important.
It really does. And if I then to tie up my story or my example to what you were saying, is that after screen time has been reduced, this child is now, and I quote, going back to what I enjoy, learning about chemistry, 10-year-old, schooling me on bromium and the periodic table. And at one point I was good in chemistry in high school, and I said, I have no idea what you're talking about anymore. But he got to start doing stuff what he told me he loves. And the mom has also been able to inform us and talk to us about how they now have more quality parent-child time. And due to the school's report that we got for this child, he hasn't been sent for a disciplinary referral. Imagine a fifth grader since January.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, when the weather breaks, I think we notice that a lot. Because I've noticed that with toddlers as well. They were showing signs the same as teenagers do, with frustration and anger and being upset, because if they're outside running, they don't have time to be upset. They're having so much fun.
Oh, well, I wish this kid was outside running all the time, but he does not do that. However, his screen time has been reduced significantly.
That's the problem. In
And
the wintertime, the screen time increases because it's cold. You can't go
so
outside.
I will still,
Amanda, you look like you were going to say something down there.
I just have something I'd like us to kind of think on, and consider. Everything that's been said makes a lot of sense, and it all, I think, comes back down, as everybody at this table has said, is to connectivity. And I think that one of the greatest things that we're suffering with right now is actually loneliness. And some of it is just due to the schedules of our lives, more dual working parents than ever before to pay bills. Yes, we can talk about phones and all of those things, but ultimately grounding and connecting our families and our children, I think is what will save us. Because even if you go back to way, way back into the times when society first started, all the way back to caveman times, there were a reason people lived together in caves. It's because being alone was a death sentence. And I truly believe we're hardwired that way in our brains. So something I think that maybe we can look at or toss around that I'd like to kind of go with is we have a lot of fantastic clubs and sports in this district. And it would be interesting, in my mind, to do some sort of a survey or questionnaire to families to say, what is prohibiting potentially your child from belonging to a club? A lot of times we'll say, well, they're just not interested, but that's not always the only factor. Because we do have families that have 9 to 5 jobs, it might be the time. It might be that if a club ends at 4:15 at the middle school or 4:30 at the high school, that there is actually no one to pick that child up. And I'm not suggesting we transport the children, but we have things like our learning lab I think it's called the Mustang Learning Lab at the high school, right?
Correct.
And it's sent out as if your child needs assistance. Well, maybe it could also be, or if there's a 30-minute gap in between the end of your club and the time you can get to your kid. And I certainly don't want to call it daycare, because these children are middle and high schoolers, and this is where our clubs are, and they are becoming responsible people, but they can't sit outside on the front stoop for 45 minutes from 4:30 to 5:15 to wait for a mom or a dad, or a babysitter or a grandparent or someone that can pick them up. So I would be interested to see if timing is prohibitive for belonging, because truthfully, we just put through a diversionary program on Wednesday, and one of the requirements is that if you're eligible for this, you are going to be required to belong to something. And there's a reason that through the research that became a very important component to that, and it's connecting the kids. And we hear the administrators talk about it all the time. We're trying to connect our kids to our buildings. We're trying to connect our kids to other kids. And I think that potentially we have a large area of growth there that will then allow for children in our buildings to be able to find something that maybe they didn't know they were interested in, because we are setting things in place to support, as Matt said, that and Dr. Schmale, that village, right? Because it doesn't work for every parent when things go from 3:20 to 4:00. And if you have to say, I'm really sorry, but I have no way of getting you. I think for a lot of our families, and I don't know that number, but it might be a significant number. And we could do that, I feel like, without it being a large cost. I'm not suggesting an activity bus. That's like a pie in the sky type of thing. But something as simple as, we have this Mustang Learning Lab, or we have a paraeducator who is willing to have 1.5 more hours on a daily basis to be in the cafeteria till 5:00 for pickup. And the children can do their homework, and it would be a study hall basically to finish that gap. Or and I'm just spitballing, certainly not trying to tell you what to
Right
do.
at school program with that carries in with that, right?
Well, isn't that elementary?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it can go into the middle school, but we only surveyed elementary. It would help with that, but they would have, 30 minutes might be a smaller block. I think they were planning on, if they were to run it, it would be from 2:30 to 6, but you could pick up any time in
Right, so
between.
what she's saying is basically that, but for the older kids.
For the older kids.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because in our elementary buildings through the years, we've had tons of different available things. At some of the elementary buildings, we had a wide MCA program, right? I think it was at Park Hills. I used to pick my nephew up and they would go there after school and there was a fee for that. And I'm understanding of that because it was run by a different organization. But that there's a difference between daycare and gap filling in my mind. And I think that unfortunately, and I could be completely wrong. We could ask and people could be like, no, we just don't want them to do it. They do enough at home. Like they're in sports, they're doing all these things. I could be completely wrong, but I think there's never harm to providing less of an opportunity for connection.
Mandy, to your point, there was a study done, and I couldn't tell you who did it, but we use it as a basis for some of our expectations, at the middle school. If and I know we're talking about mental health here, but I think that correlates very much into school success. And there was a study that if kids are involved in at least two extracurricular activities, there was a direct correlation in how they did academically in school as in a very positive way. So one of the things when I was the building administrator at the middle school, at the beginning of the year, we always had, beginning of the year meetings where we'd meet with each grade level and each team. And one of the things we tried to do each year is give kids a challenge to get involved in at least two extracurricular activities. I think we're, again, going back to our school district, I can't give you an exact number, but I would be willing I know I can confirm that each year, at least 80% of our kids were involved in two activities. Now, we also included if they were in like a travel softball team, because that's an extracurricular, even if it's not completely tied to the school. But there is absolutely a direct correlation with extracurricular activities and success in school, which of course also then spills over into how a kid feels about themselves mentally.
Right.
Um,
And also then into your classrooms, into your teachers, because
Correct.
when children, and I know we call it acadel for sports, but if you can't participate in any extracurricular because your grades are suffering and you're passionate about what you want to do, you will try to do
Right.
better because you don't want that part of your life, the part that isn't school and might be quote unquote
Right.
fun, to be cut from you. So then you're in the classroom and you're pulling your weight, because if you don't pull your weight, you're not going to whatever club you're interested in. And then potentially that boils down to a teacher seeing a classroom of more engaged students because they want to do well so that they can do what they want to do. So I do think it could be a bit of a domino effect. But it was just something I was thinking of.
Yeah, and I know last year we were really excited when we were able to add the soccer programs to the spring, because that was just another avenue for kids to get involved in extracurricular activities. I know last year was sort of a pilot, but this year there's good girls and boys programs. But in addition to that, not every kid's going to be an athlete or be involved in athletics. So that's where the club portion comes in, and getting kids to maybe engage or get involved in things that maybe they previously didn't think they would be interested in. But the most important part of that is like, I think back to when I played sports, and, I can go back and I can think about, oh, this year we made the playoffs, or this year we didn't make the playoffs, this year was better. But the reality of it is the most important part of that is the relationships I had. That's what brings me, I think that's what brings people to extracurriculars, is ultimately the relationships that you develop with classmates and peers, that those go on forever. I still talk with friends that I played sports with when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I mean, that's the critical part. And even coaching, from a coaching perspective, coaches will often say that it's not the wins and losses, that it's the relationships you have with the players. And that's the critical part, whether it's a club, whether it's the music program or the sports program, that you never lose, as you go through that and grow up into an adult.
Absolutely. I was looking through childfocus.org because I thought I saw an article there before, but I can't find the actual research study. I thought it was on there, but I can't seem to find it. But they do point out, obviously physical health goes hand in hand with good mental health as well. So I did find article where they're talking about all the benefits of clubs and sports and all that.
Right.
Just
I-
like what Dr. Smith
and-
just
and
said, it
I-
was like he was reading that article.
Right. And I think it's an easy analytic to pull, whether we do a student survey on it each year. But I think it's a really good stat to keep tabs on. Of what percentage of our kids are involved in activities beyond the school day? Because I think that could potentially drive how we respond to and help address some of the things that we're talking about today. Because again, if kids are involved a lot, I mean, it's not foolproof, but it helps. It definitely helps with these kind of things that we're talking about today.
And I'm seeing it too with my clients when we discharge, if they are not involved in anything, we make it a point that they are in some way or fashion. And it doesn't have to be like you guys have said, school related. Some of them are in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, youth groups. That's extracurricular activities that requires them to be out, socializing,
And reduce the screen
engaging,
time.
what reduces all kinds of stuff, right? Nonsense that they could be getting into and do it in a healthy way, right? And I will tell you that if I take the cases I've ever had and put them in columns, the ones that were involved in any kind of extracurricular, whether it was club, Boy Scouts, sports, whatever, versus the ones that did nothing. The grades and just even the behaviors and everything were not there. It was, there was a difference substantially.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to stress the importance of educating parents or parents educating themselves on
Yeah.
what the issues are and why the issues are and how everybody can work together to solve some of this crisis that we're still in. Very much so, not just the kids, but everybody.
Also, then lastly, to follow up real quick, so you're working on the tabs and potentially places to put like, information or things, links and stuff for like the nurse or the social workers and whatnot.
Yes,
To potentially eventually get this on
correct.
the interweb on a tab. I have a quick question. Do you have I know many schools do, school districts, but I don't know, I didn't have time to look, but I don't know if our school district has it. Do we follow, or is there somewhere on our district that follows effective school solutions?
I am not aware specifically of what that program is.
So it's just a website, informational website.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
Be another resource.
yeah, so it might, and I can link it to you. You can just look it up. It's called Effective School Solutions. I'm actually don't even know how it came to me. I'm not sure if it's because I'm in the mental health field. I'm not 100% sure. I'm also in the educational field because my master's actually is in elementary education. So I'm not sure how I got connected to the site, but I ended up finding out that I believe Spring Grove has it linked
Okay.
on their thing, and another school district does too. But it's not only, it's for it's summaried information, parent tips, or like teacher self-care.
Yeah, I
One
think
of
Spring Grove and West York has that.
Oh, yeah, Spring Grove definitely does.
Yeah.
I just couldn't remember the other one. So like, it will say like parent tips, substance use and abuse in adolescence. It'll say self-care, teacher self-care, because teacher stress is through the roof. The rates are really high. It talks about classroom behavior, 6 effective school-based behavior interventions. It's just a very short, summaried, but detailed kind of tips for parents, for teachers, for admin, for anyone, students even, on all these crises. They talk about loneliness epidemic. We are in a loneliness. We have been in a loneliness epidemic, and it unfortunately did start at COVID. But it does talk about that, and maybe potentially linking this website, which is purely informational, maybe on one of the tabs, potentially for parents and teachers and admin, maybe.
yeah, absolutely.
Thought I'd put that out there. So anything else anyone have?
I was gonna say, are we at for the good of the order?
Well, we don't have any visitors that I'm aware of. Nope, we don't have any visitors. So yes, we are at for the good of the order.
Well, for the good of the order, I would say the idea for adding the links to the website was very positive and yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was productive.
Yeah, I like that idea.
So hopefully the audio and everything is good so people can watch from home later and all that fun stuff because we really gotta just help educate each other and everybody on, how to help.
And I will say I'm anxiously, not really, because I do want her to have a wonderful maternity leave. But eventually, probably next school year, we did have that discussion again when we met, that maybe talking about some I don't want to call them speeches, but oh my God, my mind. Thank you. Like a presentation or something. And then the social workers can follow up with that within their groups that they do or things that they do with the elementary and the secondary. Following up and keeping it going from the presentation. So within like the drug and alcohol world or the bullying world or the all kinds of other ideas and stuff, stress, anxiety, depression, all that different topics. And she will kind of like take the presentation and continue it on into her groups and what individuals. So we did talk about that for the next school year. So I'll be anxiously awaiting her return for that. All right. Anything else?
Motion adjourned.
All right. Motion to, so moved. All right.
10, 11.
10, 11.